Hey guys, in this video we are going to talk about the Sennheiser house sound. Have you ever heard people glamorize the Sennheiser HD600s, the HD650s, God help you, the 660s? Maybe some nerd told you about the Mass Drop 58X Jubilee, 58X Jubilee, and many more. Well, the entire Sennheiser headphone series is quite funny, and we're going to talk about that today. A lot of people will say that Sennheiser headphones are very flat and boring and mid-range focused. Mid-range focused. What they don't tell you is all of those Sennheiser headphones actually sound pretty much exactly the same. Pretty much the exact same tonality, pretty much. So let's go ahead and look at the Sennheiser headphones. Let's start with the Sennheiser HD600s and talk about what is wrong with this headphone. Let's look at what is wrong with this headphone, okay, you guys? Let's draw on top of this. Okay, let's draw, you guys. Okay. So here we can draw on this Sennheiser HD600 graph chart. If we look, this headphone is focused on the mids. It rolls off the bass. It should be way up here. If we look at the treble, it rolls off the treble. Okay, it's focused in the mids. That's what they mean when they say the Sennheiser headphones are flat and boring. They have no dynamics. Dynamics is a bass and treble emphasis, a bass and treble extension. Instead of a V-shaped sound, a V-shaped sound would be warm and boomy, wide and bright. It would be V-shaped. You see that? The Sennheiser HD600s are actually the opposite of that. You understand? They would be V-shaped if they did this, but they don't do that. They lack bass impact. They lack that stuff. They actually sound pretty thin in the lower frequencies. They start to sound pretty thin. They're a little bit warm. They're actually kind of warm a little bit, technically. A tiny bit. They don't really have a sound stage. This region is very prominent, so it's actually pretty shouty. So the end result is a warm, somewhat warm, I'll be honest with you, somewhat warm. The only reason why these actually sound warm at all is if you draw a line across this 0 decibel plane like so, you'll notice that this region is the only region that actually goes above the line. So it is kind of warm, okay? It is a little bit recessed here below the line, which would make it sound a little bit wide. But this peak right here, this peak right here, this peak right here, it really sticks out, honestly. Because if you look at, you hear a very warm sound, but once we get to the higher frequencies, you don't really hear the treble. It's way down here. So it's a very dark sounding headphone, but it does have some spikes that kind of shoot up, that kind of give it some grit, a little bit of, bright shimmer, harsh grain to it. but it's still overall noticeably veiled, dark. But this region is, it's the most audible area above 1 kilohertz. Above 1 kilohertz, what you are hearing is usually these 3 spots. That's the main region that you're actually hearing. And it's very fatiguing, it's very shouty in that region. So you could classify this headphone as warm, lacking in sub-bass, shouty, and dark. So instead of V-shaped, it looks like this. It's focused on the mids. And, people say, oh, the Sennheiser headphones have great mids because they have no bass and they have no treble. Okay? Now, let's look at like the Sennheiser HD 650s. So when we switch back and forth between the 600 and the 650, we can see the 650 in the treble, those sharp spikes are kind of smoothed out. They're kind of smoothed out. And they're a little bit darker. You see when I go back and forth. So the Sennheiser HD 650 has less grain treble spikes. It's dampened in the high frequencies. So it's a little bit smoother, less sharp in those high frequencies. Less pointy, less pointy. Less pointy. Less pointy. Less grain, less of that. It's a little bit more blunted, like a butter knife. A little bit darker. A little bit less fatiguing. But it's the same sound, veiled, warm, lacking in deep bass impact, lacking in treble clarity, veiled. It basically lacks dynamics, bass and treble. If we go to the 650, 660s, if we go to the 660s, we'll notice that these lack even more bass and even more treble. The 660s lack even more treble and even more bass. But this thing, it kind of, how do I say it? Let's just full screen this bad boy. And, so if we look at this at face value, F11, 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 there you go, thank you. If we look at this, we have this huge 5 kilohertz peak right here. That's terrible. That's fatiguing as hell. You'll notice this region is more recessed. You'll notice the treble is completely gone at this point. And you'll notice it completely lacks any form of bass. This thing is just rolling off the bass like crazy. So this is super mid-range focused. No bass, no trebles, no dynamics. It's not fun. It's not V-shaped. It's lifeless. It's fatiguing as hell with that peak right there. You basically get a very lo-fi sound. Some people could argue that it would sound smooth because you can't hear any brightness, any sibilance, any shrillness. Well, actually, maybe you can because of this peak right here and whatever else you can hear in that horrible depleted region. But yeah, this is nothing but mids. Nothing but mids. No bass, no trebles. Are you seeing a pattern here with Sennheiser headphones? Are you seeing a pattern? Let's see what's next. Oh, this is even worse. This is even worse. Well, let's see what happened here. Look at this. This is the Sennheiser HD700, which was discontinued. And thank God for that, you know. This is horrifying. They actually released this. Did you know that? They actually released this thing to people who bought it at an exorbitant price. We can see this thing is very warm. It's lacking in sub-bass considerably. It's extremely wide. It's got this horrific peak. And it's got no treble extension. Maybe some grit. This is terrible. This is terrible. Right? Right? This is actually the foundation for the Sennheiser HD800. When we switch back and forth, we can see they slowly improved to the HD800. You see the changes? Can you see the changes happening? It looks like, you know, they added this little bit of treble. It still has this huge cut though. It still has this huge peak though, you know. They're slowly getting it up to my target, you know, a little bit. A little bit. Now they came out with the Sennheiser HD800S. And this one was designed solely to try to get rid of that 6 kilohertz peak and try to smooth it out a little bit. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice that it's Sennheiser is at least trying to get their treble in control? They still don't have enough deep bass emphasis. But, you know, you spend $1,500 on this bad boy and you're almost getting the target in the high frequencies. That's optimum. You're almost getting this. Negate this. Negate this. And you're almost getting good treble. You know. It's still lacking in bass. It's, you know, very screwed up in the treble. But it has a wide soundstage. Wow. Impressive. So that's Sennheiser. That's Sennheiser. You know? That's the best Sennheiser had to offer. Let's go to Philips and look at their Ship 9500s. Look at their Ship 9500s. Look at this. Look at this. The Ship 9500s are like $70. And let's go back to the HD800. Look at these two headphones. Don't they look mighty similar? Don't these two headphones look mighty similar? One is discontinued, the HD800, you know. But do you see the similarities? Do you see the similarities, my dudes? My dudes. Do you see the similarities in these two headphones? I hope you do. I hope you do. You see that? Ship 9500s and the HD800 have basically the same sound signature. Maybe a little bit of sub-bass roll-off on the Ship 9500s. That's a little bit better here. You know, they have this same kind of soundstage scoop thing at 2K. They both have this huge 6K peak. And what's funny is the Ship 9500 actually retain more treble information than the much more expensive headphone. So you could argue the Ship 9500s in some regard are actually better than the HD800. Isn't that scary? Isn't that scary? Now, my dudes. The HD800S versus my headphones, the Biodynamic DT990s, with worn pads. Again, with fresh pads, the DT990s with Jesus Christ. The DT990s with fresh pads have some treble spikes. They have some treble spikes. Let's compare these two. DT990 out of the box with some treble spikes versus the HD800S. You see this? They both have this peak right here. Okay. You'd see it's a little bit, jagged here. It's a bit harsh. It's a bit shimmery. It's a bit very sibilance intense. Over here, it's got this huge hole, but at least up here it retains all that treble information. And look, it's got deeper, more powerful bass. They both have a wide soundstage. Obviously, this is a bit wider on the Sennheisers. But then, when we look at the DT990s with worn ear pads, switch back and forth between DT990 with fresh and DT990 with worn ear pads. Do you see what happened now? Do you see what happened now? This is the reason why I use the DT990s. Powerful bass. Sure, it's rolling off some sub bass, but it's still audible. And it's more powerful than your average open back. It's got the smoothest freaking treble you've ever damn seen compared to this crap. You see that? You see those trebles? You see those trebles? You see those trebles? DT990s with worn pads versus HD800S. That's the reason why I use the DT990s. $1,500 versus $150, sometimes less. That's why, my dudes. And remember, it also has better bass. It has better bass response, my dudes. It has better bass response on the DT990s. So Sennheiser house sound in the 500, 600 series, the 58X Jubilee, it's basically the same as the HD660S, as we can see. Maybe the 58X has a sharper 5K peak. Maybe it has a little bit more bass extension. But it's the Sennheiser HD660S. We look at the 560S. It's essentially the same thing. We look at the 598. It's essentially the same tuning. That's a closed back headphone, so it actually has some deep sub bass. 600, 650, 660S. We can see the evolution of Sennheiser the more you pay. Once you get into the 800 series, they try to boost that treble up. They try to get rid of that shout in the soundstage region. They try to get that treble extension. It's sad. It's sad. It's so sad. That 5K peak, the treble being ripped out, the lack of bass. This is the reason why they're called mid-range cannons, the 560S. It's all mids all the time. It's all mids, low mids, mid-range, presence. That's what you're getting. Are you getting bass and sub-bass? Kind of, but not really. Are you getting treble? Jesus Christ, you're getting the Sennheiser veil. The Sennheiser veil. My dudes. No dynamics. No clarity. Nothing. It's just nothingness above 5K. It jumps off a cliff. I'll see you guys later.